Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Games Workshop recently revealed new Space Wolf, Space Marine models at Adepticon, and I think these guys stole the show. The Wolf Guard Headtakers. The initial reaction that everybody had was that these guys were basically Blade Guard veterans for the Space Wolves, so I thought, why wait for these? Let's see if I can kitbash them from the Blade Guard veteran kit. So I started with the Honor to the Chapter push fit kit that came out right around when the Indominus box came out. So I started with this model here. My first order of action was to make it look more Space Wolfy, and I think the first thing to do is to remove the Aquila and all the eagle's wings, and then also the cloak or the tabard in the front there. I have some ideas that you'll see in a second to use some of the old Bloodclaw kit. I have some spare bits laying around that I actually purchased on eBay for other conversions that you'll see soon as well. I'm going to be doing an army painting video for my Space Wolves, so you'll see those conversions that I've already done or kit bashes. I ended up leaving the shield on this one, but I remove it from the other ones. I think it just kind of adds a little bit of difference in personality. So here's the kind of cummerbund, for lack of a better term, that I'm going to use. I was using the reference art there from the release of the models, or the unveiling of the models, to decide what to do with the tabard in the front. So here I'm just kind of lining it up, getting it trimmed down to kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like. And then I'll actually start removing as much as I can from the model. And here I always like to spend more time on the actual piece that's going to be put onto the model, because I feel like if you can get that nice, it's always easier to take stuff off of the old model that's going to get covered up. Here's where I can kind of see that it is going to work out. So now I can start trimming away that tabard. It really doesn't matter what this ends up looking like underneath, because again, I'm going to be putting this over. And then a little later, I used some bits from Grey Tide Studios. I got their Primal Hounds bits kit a long time ago, again, for some of those conversions that you'll see when I do my army painting video. But for this one, I end up using a little bit of a tabard underneath this cummerbund. But this process does take a while, and it takes a lot of patience. Cutting and then measuring, or fitting and then measuring again and fitting, and seeing where it's hitting and why it's not maybe hitting the way you want it to. So don't be afraid to take some material away, but also keep in mind that doing it in small chunks or small portions is really the key here, because you can always take away more material, but you can't. It's harder to add it back. Now you can with sprue glue and stuff like that, which I do end up doing to fill a lot of these gaps here and there. But you do want to take your time and be patient, making sure that everything lines up and fits the way that you want it to. Here you can see that Grey Tide Studio bit that I was just fitting up there. It's just a tabard from them. I think it's a little shorter and it's got some fur on it, and it'll just save me some green stuff time later on. So I now have the cummerbund on, and I think it's looking really good. I'm really happy with where it looks. I think there's still some gap filling I need to do, but we can touch on that later on. Here I'm going to start on the shield. So I have, again, some Grey Tide Studio shields that I'm going to use for these guys. They look very Viking, which I really like, and look a lot more like the artwork. I ended up saving the actual hand or arm piece that attaches to the shield. That way, when it press fits in the peg that comes with the Blade Guard Veteran kit, it'll actually fit really nicely in there, and it'll line up the way I want it to. So this next piece is the axe arm. I ended up using the same Blade Guard Veteran arm and just trimmed it off, trying to keep some of that vambrace on there, and then attaching a 3D printed axe that I got off of, I think, Etsy. I think the resin munitorium. If I can find a link, I'll put it in the description. I'll speed this process up a little bit because I know you guys have seen it in other videos of mine. It's the same process, basically cutting off the hand and then attaching it the printed bit on there. For this one too, I did have to remove the Indominus symbol that was on his vambrace. I think it wouldn't have looked right on a Space Wolf model. And once that's done, then both the arms would be done. The next thing I focused on was the backpack. So they come with an iron halo on the Blade Guard veteran kit, but I wanted to make it a little bit more special to the Space Wolf Headtakers. And looking at the release art, they also had kind of special iron halos that were put on to the backpacks as well. And this is once again a Grey Tide Studio backpack decoration. So once I had everything trimmed down, there's this big gap here that just didn't look natural. So I found a trinket or reliquary that would hang off. I believe this was from either the Primaris or the Firstborn Space Wolf upgrade sprue, but it ended up filling in that space really, really nicely. So this next part, I work on attaching the arms and getting those situated the way I want them to. You can see there's a little bit of chunkiness on the back side of this arm, but I think once you get it all painted and I add in some green stuff fur on his shoulders, which is coming in a little bit, it'll look really nice. Again, speaking of that green stuff, I ended up trimming off the top part of his shoulder pad so that I can fit that green stuff on there. And just one thing that I was anticipating needing to do once I get to that point. So this is the last piece of decoration I'm going to use from Grey Tide Studio on this model. It's just a little trinket string that hangs down around his knee pad. The reference models also had these on there, and so I figured it would be a nice little touch. I just blue tacked this head on, but this guy's pretty much done and ready to go. He's got to get the green stuff, which again we'll talk about later. But then I can jump over to working on the next guy. I started off by finding the cummerbund piece that I wanted to use and then jumped over to the model to start figuring out how it's going to fit on there. This one was a little bit more challenging because he has a stepping pose, but his tabard didn't cover his right leg, so I didn't end up with that awkward gap that I ended up on the first one. So I started off here cleaning up the model like I did the last one, removing that Aquila, starting to look at how the model was going to go together, what I needed to remove, which is basically the whole tabard on this guy. And once again, this is the time to take your time, cutting off a little bit at a time just to make sure that it fits nicely and that you can get clean cuts. What you don't want to happen is you get too close, like for example where this leg is, the tabard was actually molded into the leg, and so I had to take my knife, or I took my knife instead of trying to clip it all off. That way I was able to be a little bit more precise, because the last thing you want to do is take a big chunk off, because again, it's harder to add material than it is to remove it from the model. Here I once again decided to use a tabard from the Grey Tide Studios bits. I think it'll look nicely up underneath there and cover up some of that chunks that I've took away. So now I can get to work taking the cummerbund off the sprue. And again, I think this is the Grey Hunter / Bloodclaw kit from before. And so I'm just really cleaning that up, getting that where I need it, and kind of lining it all up now that the model was all prepped and ready. I'm going to spend a little bit more time getting this one just because of that step. I ended up cutting more off the left side of the cummerbund than I did the right. And then I used some sprue glue, whatever you call it, to then fill that in and attach that to the waist there. And then one other thing that this guy had that the last one did not was a purity seal on his leg. So you'll see me trimming that off and cleaning that up. That took a little bit of amount of time just to get it nice and flush and make it look like it was never there to begin with. And then this would give me space to then put that get Great Tide Studio trinket string down on that knee pad. I ended up with 2 of the same Great Tide Studio backpack decorations for the Iron Halo, so I ended up using the exact same thing and followed the same process to attach that. Next, I got to work on the arms for this guy. Again, I like the way that it turned out with the shield and cutting off that shield arm from the other model. So I did basically the same process here. Again, trying my best to keep as much of that arm as possible. This one was a little bit different with the way that the attachment point went on there. But I used another Great Tide Studio shield, so I just basically followed the same process, trimming that down and getting that all nice. I think this one ended up turning out a little bit more chunky in the back. You can kind of tell that I cut a piece apart. But again, once you get that green stuff and everything on there, I think I was looking pretty good here. Again, I used the same Blade Guard Veteran arm and just trimmed off the hand there. And then I used, this is from the Firstborn Space Wolf kit. It's a frost axe that I found, and I thought that was a good fitting piece, and I liked the way that the hand fit on the arm there, so that's what I ended up using, and it ended up being plastic, which was a little bit more easy to attach than some of the resin pieces. But I think it looks really good and fits with the model really well. Here's this guy all done. Ended up again putting on just blue tacking on a head there. I don't know if that'll be the final head, but at least for this video it will be. And then I can move on to the green stuff, which I think is daunting for some people, but I've actually found it's a lot easier to work with than I originally thought. And then I also have one of the texture plates from Green Stuff World for fur itself. So when I'm doing fur, it ends up being really simple. And it does not take a lot of time. Honestly, I think speeds the process up, and I get a really good result by the end of it. It does take a little bit of finessing and getting used to, but once you mix it up, you have a lot of working time with it, and a little goes a long way. I probably started off with way too much here, especially for what I was doing. I ended up working out because I got kind of a cape effect out of it once it gets on the model, which you'll see here in a second. But again, this is really just a trial and error kind of process. I have a vision or an idea of what I want to use going forward, but I needed to open this up and make it fit as much as I could. Here I'm noticing I have too much, so I trimmed some of that away, but ended up taking off the backpacks here so that I could put those on later, so I did keep those separate. I didn't glue those on yet, so that's a good tip there. But honestly, it's just kind of massaging it and being gentle and trying not to ruin the texture on there, and really just gradually getting to the point where it is where you want it to be and looking how you want it to look. And again, this stuff, a little bit of this stuff goes a long way, so trimming some off is definitely a good plan, but also starting with more than you have is always nice too, because then it's always again easier to take stuff off than to add it back on. I end up not getting enough, so on the front here, I end up putting some like circular kind of metal medallions on his chest, again similar to that reference art that I'm using from the release for the Headtakers. So I ended up having to add some pieces there that connect the cloak onto those medallion pieces, or to those medallion pieces. Here you'll notice too that I kind of switch between this toothpick, which is wet by the way, and then also my scalpel. That's really just to make sure that I'm still getting that same texture, the same fur texture, and it's not looking like it's just two different pieces and that one of the pieces doesn't get all like crunched down and you again lose that texture. These guys are pretty much done as far as green stuff goes. I think they look really good, and I like the way that they turned out. The proportions and everything look a lot like those reference photos I'm using. Here I am putting on the Grey Tide Studio medallions. Again, these are part of their decorations kits, and those are those medallions that I was adding those extra pieces on for. And I think they really just match that reference photo that I was using. So then the final piece that I add here is not Grey Tide Studio. I think this is Resin Munitorium. Again, I'll post a link if I find it. But they're just little wolf skulls, and they just go in the place of the Aquila. They take a little bit of time to set up, but once you get them on there, I think they look really nice and keep it from having just open space there on the front of the chest. So here are the final models. I only did 2 because the third one is going to end up being a battle leader, which will come in the next video. And again, I'm not sure if these are going to be the final heads for these guys, but I do really like the helmeted head with the little tuft on there. That came from the Primaris upgrade sprue. So those might change, but again, I'm overall super happy with these. I think they're going to look really good once they're painted up. They're definitely satisfying my Space Wolf itch until the new army box comes out. And they'll look great sitting next to that battle leader, which again is the next video coming. So please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.